My name's Jake Miller. I fix broken things, cars mostly, and sometimes hearts. He chuckled softly as he wiped grease from his hands and looked out at the empty road beyond the garage. 46 years old, divorced, no kids. A1 Bay repair shop on the edge of a quiet town in Colorado, with more debt than tools. His garage was one of those places people drove past without noticing, just like they did with him. It was nearly 8 p.m. The sun was sinking low behind the mountains, casting a golden hue over the train tracks that hadn't seen a real passenger in over a decade. But that evening, something felt off, as if the wind itself was whispering that something unusual was about to happen. Jake had been heading home, just another night alone with takeout and silence, when he noticed movement near the abandoned station. 5 kids, no older than 12, were huddled together beside a rusted bench. They were filthy, clothes torn, faces streaked with dried tears and grime. One of them clutched a small wooden box like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. Jake slowed his truck to a crawl, rolled down the window, and called out, "You kids all right?" Silence. Only the youngest, a girl with tangled hair and eyes too old for her tiny frame, looked up and whispered, "We're waiting for our papa. He told us to wait here." Jake parked. Nobody had used that station in years. No ticket counters, no announcements, no trains. He stepped out, heart thudding, hands slightly trembling, not from fear, but something else. A tug, a pull, that invisible thread that yanks good people into something bigger than themselves. "What's in the box?" he asked gently. The boy holding it, barefoot, maybe 10, tightened his grip. "It's a secret. Mama said don't open it till we're safe." Jake nodded slowly. "And where's your mama now?" The silence that followed was heavier than steel. One girl bit her lip until it bled. Another clutched the smallest child, rocking slightly. Jake knew that silence. He'd heard it once before, years ago, in a hospital hallway. Whatever these kids had been through, it was more than anyone should ever bear. Jake crouched beside them, not too close, just enough to show he wasn't a threat. Years in a small town had taught him that broken things didn't fix all at once. They needed patience. "You hungry?" he asked softly. No response. Just a quiet rustle as the smallest boy leaned closer to the girl holding the box. Jake sighed, reached into his jacket pocket, and pulled out a granola bar. "I'm not asking for anything. Just thought maybe you hadn't eaten." The girl with the tangled hair stared at the bar like it was made of gold. Her eyes flicked to the others, seeking permission. The boy with the box gave a tiny nod. They devoured it, one bar between 5 kids. Jake leaned back on his heels. "I've got more in the truck. Sandwiches too. Real ones. You come with me, I'll give you dinner. You don't have to stay. You don't even have to talk. Just don't sleep out here, all right?" The oldest boy finally spoke. "You gonna call the cops?" Jake shook his head. "No, not unless you want me to." He could see it in their eyes. What trust looked like when it had been shattered too many times. And yet, they followed him, back at Jake's house. A creaky old place with mismatched furniture and more warmth than style. He set the table while they sat in silence, unsure of how to exist inside walls again. The little girl finally asked his name. "I'm Jake," he said, setting down plates. "And I'm not gonna ask yours, not until you're ready to tell me." She nodded. "I'm Ellie. That's Daniel, Lucy, Benji, and the littlest one is Rose." A Rose, barely 4, had already fallen asleep in Lucy's lap. Jake smiled gently. "Nice to meet you, Ellie." As they ate, Jake noticed how they protected the box. Even when passing food, the boy holding it, Daniel, kept one arm around it like a shield. Later that night, when the kids were bathed, fed, and tucked into makeshift beds of blankets and couch cushions, Jake found himself staring at the box. He didn't ask. But Daniel spoke anyway. "It's from Mama," he said. "She told me to protect it. Said it would find us a home." Jakey's voice caught. "Did she say where she was going?" Daniel shook his head. "She was sick. She just said, 'This box will lead you where you're meant to be.'" Jake waited 2 more days before he dared ask. "Mind if I see what's inside?" Daniel hesitated, then slowly, carefully, he opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of paper, browned at the edges. A note in cursive, beautiful and shaky. Jake read aloud, "Chore, To whomever finds this, if you are reading this, I am gone. These are my babies, my whole world. I have nothing to leave them but this plea. Please don't send them to a home that will break them more than life already has. Please don't separate them. They are stronger together. If you are kind, be their miracle. Amelia Grace Bennett. Jake didn't speak for a long time. He just looked at them, 5 small souls staring back with cautious hope, and he realized something. He wasn't just fixing cars anymore. He was being asked to fix something much bigger. The night after reading the letter, Jake didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table long after the kids had drifted into exhausted slumber. The letter laid out in front of him like a courtroom summons. The words, "Please don't separate them," echoed in his mind louder than any engine ever had. He wasn't equipped for this. Not legally, not emotionally. Heck, he barely had enough food in the fridge for himself most weeks. The house was small, the water heater temperamental, and the last time he'd spoken to social services, it had been about a busted car, not 5 children with nowhere to go. But then he thought of their faces, of Rose reaching for his finger with her whole hand like she'd known him all her life. Of Daniel sleeping with one arm still curled around the wooden box, even in dreams. Of Lucy, who hadn't said a word yet but had begun quietly folding laundry in the morning like it was something she could control. And Ellie. Brave, sharp-eyed Ellie, who watched him like someone who'd been forced to learn, who could be trusted, and who couldn't. Jake folded the letter back up and put it in his shirt pocket like it was a part of him now. 2 days later, a knock came at the garage just before noon. Sheriff Keller. Jake wiped his hands on a rag and braced for the conversation he knew was coming. "Got a call from someone who saw a group of kids in your truck," Keller said calmly. "Folks talk in this town." Jake nodded. "They were at the old station. No one was looking for them. No bags, no adults. Just a box and a letter." He handed Keller the letter. The sheriff read it slowly. His eyes softened, but his tone stayed measured. "You know you're supposed to report this sort of thing." Jake leaned against the truck. "And send them where?" "Back into a system that might split them up, lose them in red tape, or worse. They're just kids, Keller. Scared, quiet, grateful for food and safety. I didn't plan this. But maybe they're here for a reason." Keller folded the letter and tucked it into his coat. "You've got a big heart, Jake, but you also got a shop that barely runs and no paperwork saying you can keep them." Jake nodded again. "Then help me. Point me to someone who won't treat this like just another case." Keller looked at him long and hard. Then he said, "I might know someone in the city, a woman who used to run emergency foster placement. She owes me a favor." That night, Ellie approached Jake in the kitchen while he was making grilled cheese. "Do you have kids?" she asked. Jake froze, then quietly replied, "I did." Ellie didn't ask more, but she didn't have to. Later, when the others were asleep, Jake stood by the window with a cup of cold coffee in his hand and stared out at the stars. His son, Matthew, would have been their age now. It had been years since the accident, since the rainy night and the screaming tires and the sound that never left his dreams. The grief had torn through his marriage like a wildfire and left Jake with nothing but scars and silence. He had closed himself off to anything that resembled family, until now. Now there were drawings on his fridge, giggles down the hall, a hairbrush on the bathroom sink, a half-eaten banana on the couch. It wasn't chaos, it was life. And maybe, just maybe, it was healing him too. 3 days later, Jake got a call. Sheriff Keller had followed through. A woman named Angela Moreno, former child welfare caseworker now working privately, was driving down from Denver to observe the situation. She arrived with little fanfare, a plain gray sedan, a worn leather satchel, and eyes that had seen more broken families than she could count. Jake welcomed her in. The kids watched warily from the living room. Rose hid behind Lucy's legs. Ellie stood in front of them all like a shield. Angela crouched down, smile soft, tone even. "I'm just here to meet you, not to take you anywhere." Silence. She tried again, sitting on the edge of the couch. "I've read your mother's letter. It was brave of her to write that, and even braver of you to carry it." Daniel stepped forward with the box. "She said this would find us home. Is this it?" Angela's throat caught. Jake saw it, that moment of realization, of connection. She looked around, at the stacked cereal bowls in the sink, at the handmade chore chart Jake had posted on the fridge with shaky handwriting, at the single twin mattress Jake had dragged into the living room for them all to sleep on together. "You know," she said softly, "I've placed hundreds of kids in homes, big houses, fancy kitchens, empty bedrooms, and still, I've never felt what I feel here." She looked at Jake. "I need to run this through the right people. It won't be easy, but if you're serious, really serious, you could apply for emergency guardianship." Jake didn't hesitate. "I'm in." That evening, Jake sat on the porch swing with Lucy. She still hadn't spoken. She just sat beside him, legs dangling off the edge, staring into the dusk. Then, without looking at him, she whispered, "Mama used to sing to us, at night, even when she was sick." Jake's voice cracked. "What'd she sing?" Lucy hummed quietly, a few broken bars of an old lullaby. "You are my sunshine." Jake remembered it. Matthew used to sing it too, off-key and loud from the backseat. Tears stung his eyes, but he didn't stop her. Lucy reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled photo. "This is us. Before she got sick. Before the bad part." The photo showed a young woman, tired eyes, warm smile, surrounded by 5 laughing children on a picnic blanket. There was color in their cheeks then, hope in their posture. Jake took it gently. "She looks strong." Lucy nodded. She was, until she couldn't be anymore. Angela, moved by the story and the letter, shared a blurred, anonymous version of the note with a friend in the press, just to spread awareness about the need for sibling placements in foster care. But the story hit deeper. It went viral. "A mechanic, 5 orphans, and a box with a letter" became a headline. People across the country, across the world, began sending donations, books, clothes. One woman from Ontario offered to cover legal fees. A retired teacher from Leeds mailed hand-written letters for each child. A man from New Hampshire offered to sponsor a college fund. Jake's garage became something more than a shop. It became a symbol, not of charity, but of family. 2 weeks later, Jake stood outside the county courthouse in a borrowed jacket and freshly polished boots. Beside him sat Ellie, holding Rose on her hip. Daniel, Lucy, and Benji clung to each other like the wind might blow them apart. Inside was a courtroom and a decision that would change everything. Angela met them at the door, a large folder in her arms and determination in her step. "You ready?" she asked. Jake nodded, though his stomach was a knot of nerves. "As I'll ever be." They walked in together. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of sterile quiet that didn't suit children. But Jake's kids, because yes, they were his in every way that mattered, sat still, eyes wide, hearts pounding. The judge, an older man with silver hair and sharp glasses, looked over the case file slowly. "Mr. Miller," he began, "you are not a licensed foster parent. You have no formal training, no prior experience with children, and your income is modest." Jake stood up. His voice was calm but firm. "That's all true, Your Honor, but I have something else." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" Jake glanced back at the kids. Ellie gave him the smallest nod, like she was giving him strength. "I have love," he said, "and commitment, and pain, the kind that lets me understand theirs. I lost my own son in a car accident. I shut down for years. I thought I didn't deserve to be a father again. But these kids, they walked into my life and reminded me what family means. They aren't a project. They aren't charity. They're home." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge seemed taken aback by the rawness in Jake's voice. Angela stood. "Your Honor, we've done our due diligence. There's community support, verified donations, and letters from nearly 200 strangers advocating for this family to stay together. Mr. Miller has applied for expedited guardianship and has agreed to every requirement." The judge leaned back in his chair, then looked at the 5 children. "Do any of you wish to speak?" he asked. Daniel stood. He pulled the letter from his pocket, the original one from the box, and held it up. "This was from our mom," he said, voice shaking. "She said to find someone kind, someone who wouldn't break us. We think we did." He walked it up to the judge and placed it on the bench. The judge unfolded it. "Read it slowly," then removed his glasses. A long pause. Then, "With this court's authority," he said, voice softening, "and the power granted under emergency family placement law, I hereby grant full legal guardianship of these 5 children to Mr. Jacob Allen Miller, effective immediately." Gasps. Tears. Ellie burst into sobs. Lucy grabbed Benji and spun him in a tight hug. Rose clapped without knowing why, but knowing it was good. And Jake dropped his head into his hands and cried like he hadn't in years. They walked out of that courthouse into bright sunshine and into a world that had shifted. A week later, the shop sign was repainted by a local artist to read, "Jake's Family Garage, Repairs with Heart." The kids each had jobs. Benji handed out sodas, Daniel swept the floor, Ellie managed the cash register like a pro, Rose insisted on watering the plants every morning, even when it rained. Lucy, she started drawing again. Her sketches, of Amelia, of Jake, of the train station, were framed and hung in the hallway. The box, once a symbol of fear and survival, now sat proudly on the fireplace mantel, sealed again, with a new letter tucked inside. Chore, "Dear future, we made it. We found love. We found home. And we're never letting go." The seasons changed slowly in the little Colorado town. But inside Jake's home, life moved faster than ever. There were scraped knees and forgotten homework, burnt toast and bedtime stories, birthday candles and loud arguments over board games, ordinary chaos, beautiful noise. Jake sometimes sat on the porch swing at night, staring out at the stars, remembering how quiet it used to be, how silent his heart had become. But now he heard footsteps in the hall, laughter echoing off the kitchen walls, the hum of 5 tiny hearts learning to be whole again. One evening, after dinner, Ellie found him outside with a tired smile on his face. "You okay?" she asked, plopping down beside him. Jake nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" He looked at her, that same brave little girl who'd once stared him down at a train station. "About how I didn't save you. You saved me." Ellie grinned. Teamwork. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn deep purple, and just before heading inside, Jake whispered, almost to himself, "Funny how the most broken things can still find a way to fit perfectly together."